The morning light was barely touching the stone walls of Windsor Castle when Sergeant James Whitmore heard footsteps echoing down the corridor, fast, urgent, not the usual pace of palace. Staff going about their morning routines. He straightened his posture near the entrance to the private chambers, his hand instinctively moving to adjust his uniform. 23 years of service had taught him to read the energy of the palace. Something was wrong. A woman appeared at the end of the hallway. She wore the crisp uniform of senior household staff, her face tight with tension. Behind her, 2 junior attendants followed, carrying empty boxes. "Sergeant Whitmore," the woman said, her voice clipped and professional. "We have orders to clear the Princess of Wales's private study. We need access immediately." James felt his stomach drop. The Princess of Wales. Princess Catherine. The woman whose kindness had touched every corner of this ancient building. The same woman who remembered the names of every guard's children, who brought coffee on cold nights to those standing watch. He asked carefully. The woman's jaw tightened. "From Her Majesty, the Queen Consort. The Duchess of Cornwall's former study is being reassigned. The princess's belongings need to be removed and placed in storage." James knew exactly what this meant. Since King Charles had ascended the throne, there had been whispers, tensions, small battles fought in hallways and through carefully worded memos. The palace had always been a place of tradition and hierarchy, but something had shifted. The Queen Consort Camilla was reshaping things, making her mark, and Princess Catherine, beloved by the public and the staff alike, was somehow in the way. "I'll need to see the written authorization," James said quietly. The woman's face flushed. "Sergeant, I don't have time for this. We have our instructions. Now, step aside." Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story and want to hear more incredible true tales like this, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring you more powerful stories every week. James didn't move. His mind was racing. Protocol dictated he should comply with senior staff instructions, but something felt deeply wrong about this. Catherine wasn't just away on a trip. She was recovering. The entire nation knew she had been through something difficult, something the palace had kept carefully private. Her study wasn't just a room. It was filled with her children's drawings, personal photographs, letters from people she'd helped, the small, precious things that made a cold palace room feel like home. "Where is Princess Catherine now?" James asked. "That's not your concern, Sergeant." "Is she aware her belongings are being removed?" The woman's silence was answer enough. James felt his pulse quicken. In all his years of service, he had followed every order without question. He had stood in rain and snow. He had maintained discipline when his feet ached and his eyes burned with exhaustion. He had been the perfect soldier, but this wasn't about following orders anymore. This was about what was right. "I can't let you through without proper authorization," James said, his voice steady, despite the fear crawling up his spine. "From the princess herself, or from His Majesty the King?" The woman's eyes went wide with shock. "Sergeant Whitmore, are you refusing a direct order?" James met her gaze. Behind him, he could hear other footsteps approaching. More staff. Word was spreading through the palace that something unusual was happening. His career was on the line. His pension. Everything he'd worked for. But in his mind, he saw Princess Catherine's face. The way she'd smiled at him just weeks ago, thanking him for his service. The way she treated everyone with genuine respect, not the practiced politeness of royal duty. "I'm protecting the princess's property until I receive proper authorization," James said quietly. "That's my duty." The woman's face went pale. She turned and walked away quickly, her footsteps sharp and angry against the marble floor. James knew what was coming next. The question was, how far would they go to get past him? 20 minutes passed like hours. James stood absolutely still, his back straight, eyes forward, but his mind was spinning. He could hear movement throughout the palace, whispered conversations, doors closing. The building itself seemed to be holding its breath. Then he heard them. Multiple sets of footsteps, heavy, purposeful. 3 men rounded the corner. Palace security. Senior officers. James recognized them all. They'd shared meals together in the staff dining hall. Joked about football matches. These were his colleagues. His friends, the lead officer, Director Harrison, stopped 3 feet away. His face was unreadable. James, Harrison said quietly, "This doesn't have to be difficult. I'm just doing my job, sir. Your job is to follow orders. You're creating an incident where none needs to exist." James felt sweat forming at his collar. His hands wanted to shake, but he kept them steady. "My job is to protect the royal family's interests. All of them, including Princess Catherine's." Harrison's eyes flashed with something. Respect. Frustration. It was impossible to tell. "The Queen Consort has made her wishes clear," Harrison said. "This isn't about disrespect to Princess Catherine. It's about administrative reorganization. You're reading something into this that isn't there." James had seen too much. He'd watched as Catherine's patronages were quietly reassigned, as her staff was gradually reduced, as her public appearances were scheduled around, never alongside the Queen Consort's events. The palace was a chessboard, and someone was moving pieces. "Then get me written confirmation from the princess or the king," James said. "That's all I need." Harrison stepped closer. His voice dropped. "James, I've known you for 15 years. You have a daughter in university? A wife who depends on your income and benefits. Your pension is 3 years away. Think very carefully about what you're doing." The words hit James like a punch. Harrison wasn't wrong. His daughter Emily was studying medicine. The tuition was manageable only because of his position. His wife Sarah had health issues that required the palace's insurance coverage. 3 more years and they'd be secure for life. Refuse now, and he could lose everything. For a moment, James wavered. Was he being foolish? Making a dramatic stand over what might truly be just paperwork and protocol? Then he remembered something from 6 months ago. It was late evening, and he'd been walking past the family wing. He'd heard crying. Not loud, but the kind of quiet sobbing that someone tries to hide. He'd glanced through a partially open door and seen Princess Catherine sitting on the floor beside her children's playroom. Her face in her hands, she'd looked up, startled. Their eyes had met for just a moment. She'd wiped her tears quickly and smiled, that same warm smile she gave everyone. But her eyes had been filled with such sadness, such exhaustion. "I'm sorry," she'd said softly. "I'm fine. Just a long day." He'd nodded and walked on. But he'd never forgotten that moment. The loneliness in her face, the weight she carried alone. "I understand the consequences," James said to Harrison. "But I need proper authorization." "That's not negotiable." Harrison's face hardened. "Then you leave me no choice. You're suspended from duty, effective immediately. Hand over your access credentials."
Out.
This was real now. Not just a confrontation. His career was actually ending. He reached for his badge, his hand steady despite everything. As he held it out, another voice cut through the tension. "Stop." Everyone turned. A younger guard, Thomas, was walking toward them quickly. His face was flushed with excitement. "Sir, I have information," Thomas said, slightly breathless. "I was just contacted by Lady Susan Hussey. She says Princess Catherine was not informed about any removal of her belongings. In fact, the princess explicitly instructed that her study remain untouched until her return." Harrison frowned. "Lady Susan isn't in the chain of command for this matter." "No, sir, but she's been with the royal family for 60 years. She knows protocol better than anyone, and she says this entire operation was initiated without proper consultation. She's requesting an immediate halt until His Majesty can be briefed." The air seemed to shift. Harrison looked uncertain for the first time. Lady Susan Hussey was a legend in the palace. Her word carried weight that few others possessed. James felt a flicker of hope, but he kept his expression neutral, his badge still extended. Harrison stared at James for a long moment. Then, slowly, he pushed the badge back toward James's chest. "Keep your credentials," Harrison said quietly. "For now, but this isn't over, Whitmore. Not by a long shot." As the security officers walked away, Thomas gave James a small nod. James nodded back, grateful, but knowing the real battle was just beginning. Somewhere in the palace, someone was very angry, and they weren't going to let this go. The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence. James remained at his post, but he could feel eyes on him. Staff members walked by, some offering small smiles of support, others looking away quickly, as if afraid to be associated with him. By evening, word had spread throughout the entire palace. The guard who defied the queen consort, the sergeant who chose principal over career. People talked in hushed voices in corridors and corners. James went home that night exhausted. His wife, Sarah, was waiting in the kitchen, her face tight with worry. "Emily called," Sarah said quietly. "She heard something from a friend whose mother works in the palace administrative office." "James, what have you done?" He sat down heavily at their small kitchen table. The same table where they'd celebrated Emily's acceptance to medical school, where they'd made plans for retirement, where they'd built their whole life. "I did what I thought was right," he said. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Right doesn't pay for Emily's education. Right doesn't cover my medications. James, we're so close. 3 more years." "I know. Then why? Why risk everything for someone who doesn't even know your last name?" James looked at his wife. He loved her. He'd promised to take care of her. And he was failing that promise. "Because she does know my name," he said softly. "Last Christmas, Princess Catherine gave me a card. Handwritten, it said. 'Thank you, James Whitmore, for your dedication and kindness. Your service means more than you know.' She wrote my daughter's name too. Asked if Emily was enjoying her studies." Sarah wiped her eyes. "That's just what royals do. Public relations." "Maybe. But I watched her fight back tears when she wrote cards for every single staff member. Over 300 cards. Her hand was cramping, but she kept going because she wanted each one to be personal. That's not public relations, Sarah. That's genuine care." "Why?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. "We might lose everything," she whispered. "I know. But I understand why you did it." James squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words. Whatever came next, at least he didn't face it alone. The next morning, James arrived at the palace before dawn. He expected to be called into an office, formally dismissed, but instead he was directed to his usual post, as if nothing had happened. The silence was worse than any punishment. Then, around 10 in the morning, everything changed. A car pulled up to the private entrance. A sleek, dark vehicle that James recognized immediately. It was the king's personal car. Not the ceremonial one used for official duties, but the one he used for private matters. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. King Charles emerged, his face serious. He walked directly toward the entrance where James stood. James's heart nearly stopped. In 23 years, he'd never had a personal interaction with the king beyond formal greetings. Now the monarch was walking straight toward him. "Sergeant Whitmore," the king said quietly. James saluted sharply. "Your Majesty, I understand you had quite a day yesterday." "Yes, sir." The king looked at him carefully. His eyes were tired, carrying the weight of new responsibilities and old complications. "Walk with me," the king said. It wasn't a request. James fell into step beside him, his mind racing. They walked through a private garden, away from listening ears and watching eyes. "Do you know why I'm here, Sergeant?" the king asked. "No, Your Majesty. I'm here because my wife is furious. She believes you deliberately undermined her authority, that you created a public incident to embarrass her."
Ow.
James felt ice in his veins. "That wasn't my intention, sir. What was your intention?" James chose his words carefully. "To protect Princess Catherine's personal property until proper authorization could be verified, nothing more." The king stopped walking. He turned to face James directly. "And you didn't think the queen consort's word was proper authorization?" This was it. The moment where James could backtrack, apologize, save himself. Instead, he spoke the truth. "Thought, Your Majesty. that any significant changes to the Princess of Wales's personal spaces should be done with her knowledge and consent, especially given her recent circumstances. The king's expression was impossible to read. Seconds passed like hours. Then, finally, he spoke. "You were correct." James blinked, certain he'd misheard. Catherine was not informed, the king continued, his voice heavy. "The order came through administrative channels without my knowledge or hers. It was meant to be accomplished quickly and quietly while she was away recovering." The king looked away, toward the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. "This palace has seen centuries of intrigue and power struggles. I'd hoped to bring unity to my reign. Instead, I find the same old battles being fought in new ways." He turned back to James. "You did the right thing, Sergeant. You protected a member of my family when the system failed to do so. For that, you have my gratitude." James felt relief flood through him, but the king wasn't finished. "However," he said, his tone shifting, "you've also created a significant problem. The queen consort feels publicly undermined. There are those in her circle calling for your dismissal. Perhaps even legal action for insubordination." The relief evaporated. "I can't be seen to overrule my wife on matters of household management," the king said. "The optics would be damaging to her position and to the stability of the institution." James understood. He'd won the battle, but lost the war. "I understand, Your Majesty. I'll submit my resignation." "You'll do no such thing." James looked up confused. The king's eyes held a glint of something. Determination. Perhaps even defiance. "I'm going to handle this, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" James nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now return to your post. And Sergeant, don't discuss this conversation with anyone. What happens next needs to happen in a very specific way." As James walked back to his station, his mind was spinning. What was the king planning? And could it possibly work without destroying everything James had fought to protect? 3 days passed. 3 days of tension so thick that the palace staff could barely breathe. James continued his duties, but he could feel the pressure building. Staff members avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. He was becoming toxic by association. His friend Marcus, another longtime guard, finally pulled him aside on the third evening. "James, mate, you need to hear this," Marcus said, glancing around nervously. "The Queen Consort's private secretary has been making calls. They're building a formal case against you. Insubordination, breach of protocol. They're going to force the king's hand." James felt his stomach turn. "When?" "Tomorrow. There's a senior staff meeting. Your name is on the agenda." That night, James barely slept. He lay in bed beside Sarah, staring at the ceiling. Had he destroyed his family's future for nothing? Would the king actually protect him, or had those words in the garden been empty comfort? At 4 in the morning, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Be at the East Gate at 6. Come alone." James's heart raced. It could be a trap. Or it could be the answer he'd been waiting for. At 6, he stood at the East Gate in civilian clothes as the message had instructed. The morning air was cold, the sky just beginning to lighten. A car pulled up, dark windows hiding whoever was inside. The rear door opened. Lady Susan Hussey looked out at him. "Get in, Mr. Whitmore." Quickly. James climbed into the car. Beside Lady Susan sat another woman he recognized immediately. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Prince Edward's wife. Known for her quiet competence and fierce loyalty to family. "Sergeant Whitmore," Sophie said with a gentle smile. "Thank you for meeting us. I apologize for the secrecy, but what we're about to tell you cannot leave this car." James nodded, too stunned to speak. Lady Susan leaned forward. "His Majesty has been working on a solution, but it requires cooperation from several people, including Princess Catherine herself. She returned to Windsor late last night, earlier than publicly announced." "The princess is here," James said. "And she's asked to meet with you." 10 minutes later, James found himself in a private sitting room he'd never entered before. Small, elegant, filled with morning light. And there, sitting in a chair by the window, was Princess Catherine. She looked tired, thinner than he remembered, but her eyes held the same warmth he'd always seen. "Sergeant Whitmore," she said, standing. "Please, sit down. I understand I owe you a great debt." James remained standing. "Your Royal Highness, I was only doing my duty." "Your duty was to follow orders," Catherine said softly. "Instead, you chose to protect me. At great personal cost." She gestured to the chair again. This time, James sat. Catherine returned to her seat, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "I want you to understand something," she said. "When I married into this family, I knew it would be complicated. I accepted that. But I never imagined how isolating it would feel when the complications come from within." Her voice was steady, but James could hear the emotion beneath it. "My study isn't just a room, Sergeant. It's where I keep letters from children I've visited in hospitals. Photos from my own children's first days at school. A blanket my grandmother knitted before she passed. These things are precious to me because in a world of protocol and performance, they remind me of what's real." She paused, looking out the window. "Someone wanted to take that away, to erase my presence, piece by piece, and you stopped them." "I didn't know if I was doing the right thing, Your Highness," James admitted. "I just knew it felt wrong to let it happen without your knowledge." Catherine smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "That's called integrity, Sergeant. It's rarer than you might think, especially here." She reached beside her chair and picked up an envelope. "His Majesty and I have discussed what happened. We both agree that you deserve recognition, not punishment. But there's a problem." James felt his hope deflate. "If we publicly reward you, it creates a narrative of conflict between myself and the Queen Consort. The press would have a field day. The institution would be damaged. And that helps no one, least of all the causes I care about." She handed him the envelope. "So this is what we've arranged. It's not perfect, but it's the best solution given the circumstances." James opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter bearing the king's seal. He read it twice, barely believing the words. It was a promotion, effective immediately. He was being elevated to a newly created position, Senior Protection Coordinator for the Wales family. The role came with a significant salary increase, enhanced benefits, and direct reporting to the king's private secretary rather than through regular security channels. "You'll still work security," Catherine explained, "but now you'll oversee protocols specifically for my family. It's a genuine position that needed to be filled anyway. But it also removes you from the regular chain of command, where the Queen Consort's staff could make your life difficult." James looked up at her, overwhelmed. "Your Highness, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept. Say you'll continue to bring your integrity to this role. And say you'll help me protect my children in this complicated world they were born into." "Yes," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it." Catherine stood, and James quickly did the same. She extended her hand, and he shook it carefully. "Thank you, Sergeant Whitmore, or should I say Coordinator Whitmore, for seeing me as a person, not just a title, for protecting the things that make me human in a place that often forgets we are." As James left the room, his head was spinning. Relief, gratitude, and disbelief washed over him in waves. He'd kept his career, protected the princess, secured his family's future. But as he walked through the palace corridors, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. Somewhere in these ancient walls, someone was furious about what had just happened. The battle might be won, but the war for the soul of the palace was far from over. And now, James Whitmore was right in the middle of it. The announcement of James's promotion went out through internal palace communications that afternoon. The wording was careful, professional, making it seem like a natural administrative decision. But everyone who worked within those walls understood what it really meant. The king had chosen a side. James spent his first day in the new role, meeting with the Wales family's personal staff. He learned schedules, security protocols, and the intricate web of people who kept Catherine and her children safe and supported. The work was familiar, but elevated. He had real authority now, but he also had real enemies. On his third day, James was walking through a rarely used corridor when he encountered her. The queen consort, Camilla. She was alone, unusual for someone of her position. Almost as if she'd arranged this moment. "Coordinator Whitmore," she said, her voice cool and controlled. "How convenient." "I've been meaning to speak with you." James stopped, maintaining a respectful distance. "Your Majesty?" Camilla studied him with sharp eyes. She was smaller than she appeared in photographs, but her presence filled the space. This was a woman who had survived decades of public scrutiny and private battles. She was nobody's fool. "I want you to understand something," she said quietly. "I don't hold personal grudges. What happened with Catherine's study was a miscommunication. My staff acted overzealously, trying to anticipate my wishes. I would never deliberately hurt Catherine." The words sounded rehearsed, but there was something else in her eyes. Wariness, perhaps, or calculation. "I'm glad to hear that, Your Majesty," James said carefully. However, Camilla continued, "You created a situation that made me look petty and vindictive. Whether you intended that or not, the damage was done. Do you understand?" James met her gaze. "I understand that protecting Princess Catherine's property made some people uncomfortable. That was never my intention, but I don't regret my actions." Something flickered across Camilla's face. Respect? Anger? It was impossible to tell. "Charles believes you're a man of integrity," she said. "I suppose we'll see if he's right. But let me be very clear, Coordinator Whitmore. You now work directly for the Wales family. That means you're in Catherine's camp. And in this palace, camps matter. I work for the institution, Your Majesty." "For the whole royal family," Camilla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "How diplomatic. But we both know the truth. Lines have been drawn. You chose your side the moment you refused to step away from that door." She turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Your daughter? Emily, isn't it? Studying medicine at Cambridge." James's blood ran cold. His voice came out harder than intended. "Yes, wonderful university. Wonderful opportunities for the right people. It would be a shame if anything complicated her studies or her future career prospects." The threat was veiled but crystal clear. James felt rage surge through him, but he forced it down. Losing control now would be exactly what she wanted. "My daughter's future depends on her own merit and hard work," James said steadily. "Nothing more." Camilla tilted her head slightly. "Of course, I'm simply saying that the royal family has connections throughout British society. Those connections can open doors or close them. It's just the way things work." She walked away, her footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. James stood frozen for a moment, his hands clenched into fists. Then he pulled out his phone and called his wife. "Sarah, I need you to listen very carefully." That evening, James sat in his small office reviewing security protocols, but his mind was elsewhere. The Queen Consort's words kept replaying. The subtle threat against Emily. The reminder that power in the palace extended far beyond its walls. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Thomas, the young guard who'd brought information about Lady Susan during the confrontation, stood in the doorway. "Sir, may I speak with you? Privately?" James gestured him in. Thomas closed the door and sat down, his face troubled. "I need to tell you something," Thomas said, "about why I really came to you that day with Lady Susan's message." James waited. "Overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear," Thomas continued. "Two of the Queen Consort's senior staff, they were planning the whole thing. The removal of Princess Catherine's belongings wasn't a miscommunication. It was deliberate." James felt his chest tighten. "Thomas, that's a serious accusation." "I know, sir, but I heard them. They said Princess Catherine had become too popular, that she was overshadowing the Queen Consort. They wanted to remind her of her place, starting with small things, like reassigning her study. Then, gradually more." "Did they mention the Queen Consort directly?" Thomas hesitated. "Not by name. But the implication was clear. They were following what they believed to be her wishes. Whether she gave explicit orders or just created an environment where this seemed acceptable, I don't know." James rubbed his face, exhausted. This was bigger and more dangerous than he'd realized. It wasn't just about a room or belongings. It was about a systematic effort to diminish Catherine's position within the royal family. "Why are you telling me this now?" James asked. "Because they're not done," Thomas said quietly. "I've heard whispers. Plans. They're looking for other ways to undercut Princess Catherine. And they see you as a problem now, someone who'll get in their way." James thought about Emily, about Sarah, about everything he had to lose. Then he thought about Princess Catherine's face in that sitting room. The exhaustion, the loneliness, the quiet strength it took to remain kind in a world that was actively working against her. "Thomas, I need you to document everything you hear. Dates, times, exact words if possible. But be careful. Don't put yourself at risk." Thomas nodded. "What are you going to do, sir?" "I'm going to do my job," James said. "I'm going to protect the Wales family. All of them, no matter what it costs." After Thomas left, James sat alone in his office. Outside, the palace was settling into its evening routine. Lights glowing in windows. Security shifts changing. The ancient building breathing with the rhythm of centuries. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. Battle lines were being drawn. Loyalties tested. And James Whitmore, a simple sergeant who just wanted to do the right thing, found himself at the center of a conflict that could reshape the entire monarchy. His phone buzzed. A text from Princess Catherine. "Thank you for everything you've done. Please know that William and I are committed to protecting those who stand with us. You're not alone in this." See, James stared at the message for a long moment. Then he saved it, turned off his phone, and looked out at Windsor Castle's illuminated towers. He'd spent 23 years protecting these walls. Now he was protecting the people inside them, and he would see it through wherever it led. 6 weeks later, everything changed again. James was coordinating security for a private family event at Windsor when his phone rang. It was Prince William calling directly. In all his years of service, this had never happened. "James, I need you at Kensington Palace immediately. Don't tell anyone where you're going." 20 minutes later, James was sitting in William's private office. The prince looked tired but determined. Beside him sat Catherine, and to James's surprise, King Charles himself. "We have a problem," William said without preamble, "and we need someone we can trust absolutely." The king spoke next. "James, what I'm about to tell you stays in this room. 2 members of the Queen Consort's staff have been leaking stories to the press. False stories about Catherine. About tensions in the family. About me being manipulated." James felt his pulse quicken. "Do you have proof, Your Majesty?" "We do," Catherine said quietly. She slid a folder across the desk. Phone records. Email trails. Payments from tabloid newspapers. We've been investigating quietly for weeks. James opened the folder. The evidence was damning. Deliberate, systematic leaks designed to paint Catherine as difficult and the king as weak. All traceable back to 2 specific individuals. "The question," William said, "is what we do about it. If we fire them publicly, it creates a scandal. If we do nothing, it continues. And worse, it emboldens others who might want to play these games." James looked at the 3 of them. The future of the monarchy, sitting in one room, asking for his counsel. "May I speak freely?" he asked. "Please," the king said. "The problem isn't just these 2 people. It's the culture that made them think this was acceptable. Someone created an environment where undermining Princess Catherine seemed like loyalty to the Queen Consort." The room was silent. The king's face was unreadable. James continued carefully. "You can remove these individuals quietly, transfer them, give them generous severance. But unless you address the root cause, others will take their place." "And what is the root cause, in your view?" the king asked. James took a breath. This was the moment where he could lose everything. But these people had asked for truth, and he would give it. "With respect, Your Majesty, the root cause is ambiguity about roles and expectations. The Queen Consort's position is historic. She's your wife, and she deserves respect, and support. But Princess Catherine is the future queen, the mother of the future. Okay, there's been no clear guidance on how these roles should coexist. Catherine looked down at her hands. William's jaw was tight. The king stood and walked to the window. For a long moment, he stared out at the gardens. "You're right," he finally said. "I've been trying to balance too many things. Trying to give Camilla the recognition she's earned while not diminishing Catherine's importance. In doing so, I've created confusion. And in that confusion, people with agendas have thrived." He turned back to face them. "That ends today." Over the next hour, James witnessed something extraordinary. The king, his son, and his daughter-in-law planning a fundamental restructuring of palace operations. Clear lines of authority, explicit protocols about how the two households would interact, and a private meeting between the king and the queen consort where these new realities would be explained. "What about the two staff members?" James asked. "I'll be gone by tomorrow," William said firmly. Quietly, with enough severance to ensure their silence, but they'll understand that any future leaks will result in legal action. Catherine spoke up. "And James, we want you to head a new division. Palace integrity and standards. You'll report directly to the king's principal private secretary. Your job will be to ensure this kind of behavior never happens again." James was speechless. Another promotion, yes. But more than that, it was a statement. The monarchy was choosing integrity over palace politics. "There's something else," the king said. "Camilla needs to be part of this solution, not positioned as the villain. Whatever mistakes were made by her staff, she didn't order character assassination. I know my wife. She may want prominence and recognition, but she's not cruel." "Then she needs to be part of setting the new standard," James said. "If this comes from you alone, it looks like you're choosing sides. If it comes from both of you together, it shows unity." The king smiled slightly. "See? This is exactly the kind of thinking we need." 3 days later, a brief statement went out to senior palace staff. New protocols for inter-household cooperation. A commitment to mutual respect and support among all members of the royal family. Signed by both the king and the queen consort. To most people, it seemed like routine administrative business. But those who understood palace dynamics recognized it for what it was, a peace treaty and a warning. James's new role began immediately. He spent his days reviewing processes, training staff on professional standards, and creating systems to identify potential problems before they escalated. It was challenging work, but deeply meaningful. One morning, several months into his new position, James encountered the queen consort in a palace corridor. He tensed, remembering their last conversation and her veiled threat about Emily. But Camilla's expression was different this time. She stopped and spoke quietly. "Coordinator Whitmore, I understand your daughter received an internship offer at St. Thomas Hospital. Congratulations." James's guard went up immediately. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I want you to know something," Camilla said. "I never made any calls about your daughter. What I said that day was spoken in anger. It was beneath me, and I regret it." James studied her face, looking for deception. But he saw only weariness and something that might have been regret. "I've spent years fighting to be accepted," Camilla continued. "Fighting to be seen as legitimate. And in that fight, I sometimes confuse loyalty with control. Charles has helped me understand the difference." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Catherine is a remarkable woman. She'll be a remarkable queen. I see that now. And I'd rather spend my remaining years supporting her than competing with her." "That's good to hear, Your Majesty," James said sincerely. "Don't misunderstand," Camilla said with a slight smile. "I still think you were insubordinate that day. But Charles was right. You were also correct. Sometimes those two things can both be true." She walked away, leaving James alone in the corridor. He thought about that first morning, standing in front of Catherine's study door. The fear. The conviction that something wrong was happening and he had to act. He'd been terrified of losing everything. His career, his family's security, his sense of who he was. Instead, he'd found something unexpected. Purpose. Not just following orders, but actually making a difference in an institution that desperately needed. People willing to do the right thing. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Emily just called. She's so happy about the internship. She says to tell you thank you for teaching her that integrity matters more than convenience. Feeling warmth spread through his chest. That evening, he stood outside Windsor Castle as the sun set. The ancient stones glowed gold in the fading light. He thought about all the people who had stood in this same spot over. Sentries, guards, servants, workers, people, whose names weren't remembered but whose small acts of courage and conscience had shaped history. In ways no one would ever fully know, he wasn't a hero. He was just a man who'd refused to look away when something wrong was happening. To someone who couldn't defend herself in that moment, but maybe that was enough. Maybe that was exactly what the world needed, more of it. Inside the castle, lights came on in windows. The Wales family was home. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were probably finishing dinner. Catherine was likely reading through correspondence, planning her next engagement. William was reviewing the day's briefings, and they were safe. Protected not just by walls and guards, but by a renewed commitment to the values that made the monarchy meaningful. James Whitmore, former sergeant and current senior coordinator for palace integrity and standards, turned and walked through the gates. He had a family to get home to, a life that had been forever changed by one decision to stand his ground as he drove away. Windsor Castle stood eternal against the darkening sky, ancient, powerful, imperfect, but inside those walls, something important had shifted. One guard had refused an order, and in doing so, had reminded everyone that sometimes the most important duty isn't following commands, it's following conscience, and that some things are worth protecting, even when the cost seems too high to bear, because in the end, we're not remembered for the battles we avoided, but for the moments we stood firm when standing firm mattered most.